Hi.
Hola, hola, ¿cómo estás?
Muy bien, todo excelente.
Lo siento para el cambio de tiempo.
No, no te preocupes. Tu español está muy bien. Has mejorado mucho.
Estoy practicando poco a poco, sí,
Mm.
para hablar con mi abuelita.
Oh,
¿Está lista?
lista.
Ok. Bienvenidos a Firme Physiology. Tenemos un episodio muy especial y muy importante porque vamos a hablar sobre de un tema que en Estados Unidos es muy popular. El tema del microbiome. Y tenemos una investigadora que vamos a hablar con ella y aprendemos sobre el microbiome. Y estoy muy contento para mi tiempo con Katherin. Katherin, gracias por su tiempo. Y ¿cómo estás este día?
Hello, everyone. I'm fine. Thank you very much, Kurt, for your invitation. Yes, I'm speaking English. I'm going to prove my English, and you want to improve your Spanish. So,
Mhm. Simón, Simón.
it's a good exercise for both.
Yep, yep.
Hello, my name is Katherin. As you said, I'm a sports nutritionist with a master's degree holder in sports and physical activity physiotherapy. The last year, I complete my master's degree in microbiota, probiotics and prebiotics in Spain. And yeah, currently I'm working in sports nutrition and also in a university teaching something about sports science and also microbiota in these areas.
Perfecto, perfecto. Y hablamos a todo, sobre de todo. Para empezar, to start with, I'm sorry, I'm just speaking Spanish now. I'm not even thinking about. Okay, yeah,
Spanglish.
yeah, Spanglish. Yes, we're going to talk about the microbiome with a researcher who specializes in the field of study of the microbiome and probiotics. So we're going to talk all about that and hopefully learn some good information. Because, like I said earlier in Espanol, is a topic that is very popular in terms of health and disease, but also from exercise and sports performance. And with that, there's a lot of hype about supplements. So we'll talk a little bit about the probiotic supplements and the microbiome. So to start with, though, I'm always interested to hear how people got interested and got started in their field of study. So, Katherin, how did you get interested in sports nutrition, and how did you get into the specific area of study of the microbiome and probiotics?
Wow, okay. I choose to specialize in sports nutrition because as a child, I always dreamed to work with sports or athletes, and I always dreamed of working as a nutritionist at the Olympic Games. So I start to study nutrition, and then I follow the master's degree in physiotherapy in sports and physical activity. And I always love this area. I always maybe I have this emotion for sports. I love the dynamics of sports, and I understand very good how the body can maybe improve the process across the nutritional intervention and something like that. And so this is an inspiration for me to have a career in sports science and improve also the quality of life of all my patients and the athletes.
And you did, you mentioned did your master's in Spain?
Yes, I did. In Spain, it was a new master's degree in microbiota, probiotics and prebiotics. Maybe I feel this calling to maybe to improve my knowledge in microbiota. I feel always curious about the mechanisms, the physiology of microbiota. And for this reason, I choose also to study another master's degree in microbiota because I feel that this topic is very important for everyone. It's not just a trend,
Hmm.
like everybody said right now, it's just a trend. No, for me, it's a passion to know more about the microbiota. And for this reason, I choose to study more, more about this.
And so that was your second master's degree.
Yes, it
Okay,
is.
what was your bachelor's, and then what was your first master's degree in?
My first master's degree was in Colombia at the National University. It was in physiotherapy of sports and physical activity, but it was a general master's degree. And in the second case, it was a specific master degree in microbiota using the clinical, also sports, just emphasizing microbiota.
Interesting, interesting. Okay. It's interesting that you say like it's not just a trend because you've been studying it for a while, right? You've been interested in knowing about it for a while. And so sometimes things seem like a trend just because they're popular, right? But
Yes.
does it mean like that's where it all started? Yeah, definitely. It's become more recognized and a more popular topic, or there's more awareness about it. So I'm very interested to hear about the actual, research and the science behind it, because sometimes on social media and podcasts, the science is not highlighted all the time or represented 100% accurately. So it's good to talk about the science. So just to get start with, what is the microbiome and how does that relate and affect the body? Just sort of like in general, what is the microbiome?
The microbiome is the group or the collection of all the microorganisms, including bacteria, fungi, viruses, all these microbios that we know that they live in our bodies. They live in the nature. They live in all the life. So the microbiome includes the microbiota that it is bacteria, archaea, fungi, viruses, and their information also. And also the microbiome includes maybe these substances, nucleic acids, and also all their metabolites that we can found in these big microbials that we can find in everywhere.
And so a lot is focused on, I think the most well-known microbiome section or area is the gut, right? But there are also other populations at other parts of the body, correct?
Yes, it is. Yes, but we know that in the gut, there is the most dense and the most diverse microbiota. In that case, I'm talking about the microbes. And we have another sites of the body that we can find this microbiota. For example, oral cavity, skin, vagina, in other localizations in our body. But we know that the gut is the most studied part of the body that we can found studies and experiments related to microbiota.
And the gut would be an area where there can be an exchange of, say, metabolites, right, from the bacteria and the other organisms in the gut, and then getting into the body and affecting the actual physiology and the health of the human, right?
Yes, in gut microbiota, we can break, for example, micronutrients, carbohydrates, lipids, proteins. Maybe in the gut, we can provide more energy to our body, and also in the gut, maybe we can have more neurotransmitters. And also we can modulate the inflammation and maybe, for example, oxidative stress. For this reason, in the gut, we have this emphasis in the state of our microbiota in relation to other sites of the body.
And so what factors affect the microbiome? Because I've read a little bit. I'm nowhere near an expert, but we're born with I don't know if it's called a set, but we're born with, and even the method that we were born with, right? Either vaginal birth or cesarean section can affect that. But what factors, from birth, diet, environment, and we'll talk a lot about the exercise too, but just broadly speaking, what seems to affect the microbiome?
Oh, all of them in different ways, but our microbiome could be affected by the quality of the diet, for example, for environment changes, also the way of born, vaginal or cesarean, the use of antibiotics in the lifespan, for example, of course, the exercise in type and intensity of exercise is very important. But we have maybe this good point that the microbiome, we can modulate it with many factors. See, it could be good and at the same time it's not too good, but we can modulate our microbiome in all ages, in all lifespan, and our microbiome, it could be resilient in a good way because we can damage our microbiome, but we can recover our microbiome in every moment. We could change these factors in some way. For example, changing our diet, maybe to increasing the exercise every day, or maybe to change our environmental factors. It could change the microbiome. So we have these good things with microbiome. It's not always the same. We could change our microbiome with this factor that could affect it.
Is there such a thing, from maybe in like as a concept, like a good microbiome, like a good microbiome versus, or a healthy microbiome, maybe like as a concept, but also is that something that could be clinically diagnosed? Is that like something you could assess and measure and evaluate?
Oof, there is not a single perfect or a single microbiota profile. We can say that some microbiota is healthier than other. because it's like our, I don't know, our fingerprint. We
Hmm.
have everyone has a different fingerprint. It's unique for everyone. It could happen with microbiota. We could have different types of bacteria, viruses. We can have a different richness, diversity of microbiota, and it doesn't mean that is healthier than other. This is maybe a lack of the research about microbiota, because there is not maybe right now a perfect microbiota. There is not a good profile or a healthy
Hmm.
profile of microbiota. Every study changed the concept of a healthier microbiota. It's something difficult to maybe to do a profile, a perfect profile of a healthier microbiota. It could change in every study. So in that case, we have to remember that the microbiota change with age, with diet. It's always changing, and it's always in recovery, or always they. Oh, sorry, the microbiota recover with damage, and then he could be changing every time. So it's difficult to have just one profile of a good or healthy microbiota. It's
Okay.
difficult to have one.
Yeah. Okay. Yeah, I like how you mentioned it's like a fingerprint, because that highlights the individual variation that you're mentioning, right? So as even if we, there's no such currently, not a diagnosable or quote unquote good or bad microbiome, there are things that can improve the gut microbiome and then also help with improving health and function, right? Things like prebiotics or probiotics, correct? Those are things that have been shown to positively affect the microbiome and then also lead to positive health outcomes. Is that correct?
Yes, it is correct. If we supplement with probiotics or prebiotics or symbiotics, we can improve and change the profile of this microbiota. Oh, of course, it is very important to know that, for example, probiotics are live bacteria that we can eat or supplement, and these live microorganisms we administrate in a good amount, we can have benefits in our body from this kind of bacteria. For example, lactobacillus or bifidobacteria, we can have benefits. It's a maybe it's a relationship. It's a good relationship. Bacteria can benefit from our body, and we benefit from this bacteria. So these probiotics has the function to improve and to give another strains of a bacteria or another fungi species to our gut, for example, to change this profile of microbiota. So in that sense, it's very important to improve it through the probiotic intake, for example, or supplementation.
And so because there is a high individual variation in the microbiome, do some do probiotics have different effects on people?
Yes, yes. Maybe in athletes we have, or in the sports contest, the probiotic supplementation, it can reduce the incidence of upper and gastrointestinal symptoms, upper respiratory tract, and we can find very good results. But right now we can affirm, or we can say safely that probiotics can reduce the amount of sickness in athletes or can change something in the physiological way. No, maybe it's too early to say that kind of things. But yes, we have some good improvements in some functions. We have good results. But in the other side, we have something maybe related to the safety of probiotics in some conditions. For example, in immunosuppression, I don't know how to say it in English, when your immune system goes down. In that case,
Like immunosuppressed?
immunosuppressed,
Okay.
exactly.
Oh.
In that cases, maybe or changes in the immune system, the probiotics could be not beneficial for the host, for example, or some infections or some, for example, sepsis. These kind of things could be not good to supplement it with probiotics. And in some cases, there is a lack of information to the benefits, so it could be not good or efficient to use probiotics, for example.
How exactly do the probiotics affect the microbiome? Do they get integrated into the gut microbiome? And then also, you know, how how is the efficacy of probiotics? Because I imagine you probably need an effective strain or species and also in adequate amounts, right? So can you
Yeah.
speak to that?
Okay. When we prescribe probiotics, for example, to general population, it is essential to understand behind this probiotic, there is a clinical trial, maybe in animal or human model. It's very important to know that it's if you see a probiotic, behind this probiotic there is a lot of experiments and clinical trials. So in these clinical trials, we demonstrate the significant effects or results in reducing the specific clinical issue or their safety or effectiveness, for example. So it depends, for example, the strain that we use, the maybe the amount of this bacteria or this fungi, for example, and we have to be careful because we know we need to know the study that the laboratory or the maybe these companies can demonstrate behind these probiotics. See, so in that sense, not all probiotics are suitable for everyone. See, and for every outcome. Yes, we can have a probiotic for GI stress, for example, and we can have another type of probiotic to improve the immune system. Not all the probiotics can be used for one purpose, for example. Yes, and this is not a good thing related to probiotic supplementation. We can have one strain that is very good to reduce GI symptoms, and we can have another strain that is good, for example, to improve the immune. Both have different times of administration, for example. They both have different amounts of bacteria. Both can interfere or maybe to have another mechanism of action, for example. And we must be careful in the sense that we choose another type of probiotic.
And for probiotics to lead to improved outcomes, do they need to colonize in the gut, or can
Yes.
they provide benefit just by kind of passing through?
So the probiotics or these bacteria or fungi can colonize our gut, for example, and then they change the population, for example, of this strain, of this lactobacillus in the gut, and have more population of these bacteria, we can, for example, modulate in a different way the inflammation, for example, oxidative stress, and other actions. In that sense, probiotics can change the number in maybe richness, so more bacteria, and diversity to have another difference of microorganisms in the gut to have these benefits, for example. In that way could work the probiotics.
And so that mechanism is different than the prebiotics because the prebiotics are not live organisms, correct?
Yes, it's correct. The probiotics maybe it's like the fuel of our bacteria. The probiotic is a substrate that it is selective used by the host microorganism that could confer good benefits to our health. For example, dietary fiber, the fiber that we intake could be a good substrate for our bacteria in our gut. Our bacteria love the fiber because it could provide with short chain fatty acids, for example, with butyrate. That could be a good way to be in action, no? To survive. It's like the fuel of our bacteria, of our microbiota.
And is there issue with taking both a prebiotic and a probiotic at the same time?
No, there is
Okay.
no any issue. It could be very good. It calls a symbiotic, for example. It's a mix of prebiotics and probiotics. We have the microorganisms and the substrate at the same time, and we can have more benefits for the host to intake together. This symbiotic is the mix of prebiotics and probiotics. So it could be very good because we can guarantee the maybe the amount of prebiotics to fuel the probiotics inside the gut. So it could be very good to have the symbiotic intake.
And what about postbiotics? What are postbiotics and what is their mechanism of action?
Okay, postbiotic is like the preparation of maybe these microorganisms, but they are not live. They are inanimate in an animate way, and they maybe we can have also their composition also there, but both could have benefits for the host. For example, butyrate. Yes, we have this postbiotic with butyrate. There's a capsule of butyrate, for example, and we can intake it. And this butyrate can benefit our gut, our bacteria, but also it can benefit our physiology in general. So this is an example of postbiotic. It's an inanimate microorganism, but also their components or something like that. For example, short chain fatty acids are a good example of postbiotic.
And so would combining all three of those together also be advantageous?
Yes, but right now we don't have this mix of these three together, no yet. But it could have a more benefit also. Yes, of course.
So we discussed, you mentioned, the microbiome of an individual is similar to a fingerprint, right? It's very, very individual. And we also mentioned, diet and also some of these supplementation strategies. Are there general recommendations that a general population should sort of follow or adhere to? How should like a regular person might approach? I want to improve my microbiome for just overall health. How might they approach that in terms of what is recommended at a general population standpoint?
Okay, we can modulate our microbiota through the diet. I think this is the key modulator of our microbiota. For example, to include more prebiotics in our diet, it could be amazing for our microbiota. For example, to have a good recommendation of fiber in our diet. To improve, for example, the intake of fruits and vegetables, at least 5 portions per day. Maybe it could be very good because fruits and vegetables the polyphenols, the antioxidants, and other compounds that could act as a probiotics, for example. The polyphenols could be a probiotic also, and we can take through the diet. So in that sense, we can maybe to improve our fiber diet, our fiber intake, our intake of fruits and vegetables. Also, to increase our intake of antioxidants, it could be excellent for our microbiota, and also to modulate our inflammation, system inflammation. And also to intake the fermented beverage, fermented milks, for example. This fermented food could be a good way to have these leaf bacteria. They act as a probiotic also. I want to clear something. Probiotics we can find it in supplementations, but also we can find it in food. For example, yogurt, kefir, this beverage, this milk, maybe fermented milks. We can find these leaf bacteria, and these bacteria from food can colonize the gut also, and can confer benefits also for our microbiota. It could change the profile of our microbiota, and also this food can be the way to have proteins, good proteins, to have vitamins, to have prebiotics also, to have probiotics, to have another compounds. Yes, that sense, for me, to have the probiotics through the food, the real food, is more beneficial than have just the supplement, because through the food you can have or receive other nutrients. So, for example, vitamins, minerals, polyphenols, antioxidants, proteins. There is a lot of research about microbiota and proteins. We can have other things related or in relation to just the supplement. So in that sense, for me, it's very good to include maybe 2 or 3 portions per day of these probiotics from food. For example, fermented milks or yogurt, kefir. More and more of these portions could be beneficial for the host also.
I'm glad you said that, because even in my mind, when talking about microbiome and probiotics and things like that, the thought of supplements comes up, right? I don't know how big the supplement industry in probiotics is in Colombia, but in the US it's growing, and there's a lot
It's
of
a big industry.
yeah. So I think a lot of people, including myself right now, the idea of getting more, probiotics or improving your microbiome, the first thought is supplements. So I'm really glad you mentioned the food
Exactly.
approach.
Yeah.
And the kefir from Barranquilla at the conference that I met you at. Oh
Yes.
my gosh, that stuff was so good.
Yeah, it was a good. The kombucha also. Yes, we have this industry, this food industry related to fermented foods that is growing also and has another benefits because there is no just the bacteria there, but we have another nutrients. It's complete. It's more complete.
No me gusta kombucha, but the kefir,
Great, amazing.
since we're mentioning the supplement stuff and the microbiome stuff, there was a recent paper that came out, and I don't know how big of a if there is a presence of this supplement that is very popular in the US called AG1, or Athletic Greens is called AG1 now. It's sort of this sort of like super green food powder sort of thing that has
Mhm.
I'm not I don't remember the full composition, prebiotics, probiotics, but they do claim that it is going to improve gut health, improve the microbiome. And up until recently, there hadn't been any, published human data. A couple of things that were in like a simulated digestive tract model, which is very interesting, right? But it's not the human, right? It's not the human gut, not clinical outcomes, not physical outcomes. But there was a paper that did get published recently. It showed that it did affect the microbiome, but it did not lead to physical, clinical, human level outcomes, right?
Well, in that sense, in many studies related to microbiota, it's still too early to make a definitive conclusion or significant outcome. It's really difficult because, for example, as we said before, we have just one type of strain, and this type of strain can affect just one outcome or just one thing, but it doesn't work for another outcome. So in that sense, for example, in that study, uh, for example, in stool consistency or gastrointestinal pain, another type of modulation, it doesn't change. So in this study, we still have limitation in methodology. For example, it's not the same results. Maybe could be different results in human models, not in animal models. We can say that it works at the same result. For example, it's not good to say that we have the same results in a gastrointestinal model that in the human gastrointestinal humans it could work different in different ways. Sorry. So also the methodology and the control of variables such as, for example, diet, body composition, for example, medication use. It could the use of antibiotics and other medication. It could affect the microbiota. For example, the intensity of exercise when we use it in sports or physical activity research. It's very important. As we said, microbiota can be modulated in different ways, so we need to control these always also. The diet, the environment, the exercise, the use of medication, all these variables we have to control, maybe to have the good results or clear results for everyone. For this reason, the studies of microbiota or probiotics could be very difficult to understand and to conclude some specific outcomes. Not good to conclude it. And we have to be careful, for example, the use of the specific strain of probiotics that the study or the research use, because we can maybe have different results, and we can conclude that, for example, this is a probiotic and it works for gastrointestinal stress, but maybe this kind of probiotic, this specific probiotic, has not any gastrointestinal outcome. It could change inflammation, for example. It could modulate inflammation and has another perspective of action, for example.
Right.
So for that reason, it could be still too early to talk about the definitive conclusions about one supplement to change something. In the case that you use, for example, in that study, there was good results related to diversity and maybe richness of some species, some strains that improve in this gastrointestinal model. But there was not results, for example, in the physical variables, for example, the stool consistence, the Bristol range, for example, these kind of things that it could affect to our patient in the daily life, for example. Too early to know it.
Yeah. Okay. Before we get to the exercise, okay, I am interested in this because I think the first time I really got introduced to the microbiome, at least in a scientific way, was at a conference, and it was within the context of obesity. So can you speak a little bit about how the microbiome relates to obesity, how it affects obesity, or how obesity affects the microbiome? What's your understanding on that? Because I find that very, very interesting, because there are some interesting therapies that have been sort of developed in that, like fecal transplants. Like that was the first exposure to microbiome that I got. I was like, whoa. That's interesting, right? But can you speak to that, the relationship of microbiome and obesity?
Yes, it's a bidirectional relationship. We don't know yet. It happens with microbiota. We don't know if, for example, dysbiosis could be the cause, or maybe the fat cause fat.
Yeah.
We don't know. We don't know. In obesity, it's the same thing. The microbiota, for example, can modulate the chronic inflammation in either positive or not positive way. Yes, and for that reason we talk about it could be the cause or the effect. We don't know yet. In the case of dysbiosis, for example, to have a not healthy microbiota, it could maybe increase this chronic inflammation and could be the cause of obesity, for example. To have a specific profile of microbiomes in animal models, maybe conclude to it, or maybe to have a link or relation with obesity. A specific profile of microbiota could be in relation to the increase of obesity. For example, the healthy microbiota from lean meat, for example, has another profile or had another profile in that studies, and the obese meat had another microbiota profile. For that reason, we know that there is a obese microbiota and the lean microbiota type. But in general way, the microbiota can modulate the type of bacteria we have in the gut, can modulate the chronic inflammation that could be the cause and can be the effect also of obesity. So there are a lot of studies related in relation to it, but it's maybe confused some these variables that we talked before, because it could be the reason, or maybe it could be the effect of the diet. For example, the diet of the obese models, human or animal, whatever. The diet is very important. It's an important modulator of microbiota. So we don't know if the diet could change the microbiota of obese models. We don't know if it could be the sedentary life affect the microbiota, or maybe the way of birth also could affect, since the scheduled all the microbiota to the life, maybe. So in that way, just the main action of the microbiota is to modulate the chronic inflammation in the case of obesity, just in terms of physiology, general physiology of obesity.
Everything that you're mentioning, right, speaks to how it can be difficult to study, right? Because it's affected by so many things. And, this is a thought that I had, because like we mentioned how many things that it is affected by. And there are even, some genetic influences as well, correct?
Yes, yes. But yeah, we have this genetic influence, but also we have external
Right.
influence. Also, we talk about the diet, the way of burn. For example, the first 6 months, the feeding of the baby, for example, the breastfeeding, or have the introduction to new food. These first 6 months of life are very important to the colonization of the microbiota in the years later. So in that way, we have a lot of things that we must consider in the studies of microbiota, and also this influence of microbiota.
Right. As you're studying and doing research on the microbiome, what what is a consideration for that? And then also including specifically with, say, genetic differences, but then also like we've been talking about how much food can affect the microbiome, right?
Right.
And so, for example, I might live in Southern California, but I'm Mexican and I eat Mexican type food, right? And the person across the street might be of another ethnicity and they eat a different type of food, but we might be recruited in the same study. But because of our ethnic differences, as well as the cultural and food differences, how does one think about that from a research standpoint? Because you're introducing a lot of heterogeneity and variation into the subject pool. You know what I mean?
No, no. Tell me more.
Let's say that, at Long Beach State, someone is going to do a microbiome human study, right? And the inclusion criteria is 18 to 40, right?
Yeah.
Healthy adult. And I enroll, right? And then also, my next door neighbor, they enroll too. But like we mentioned, there's a lot of factors that affect the microbiome, and like I was mentioning, the particular way of food that I eat, the particular type of food that I eat, and my ethnic background, and my next door neighbor, who's also going to be a subject in the study, might eats different than me, which affects their microbiome, has a different ethnic background than me, affects their microbiome, in addition to all of the other external environmental lifestyle things that you had mentioned earlier, right? So if we're in the same study, but we have such a large variation between us. Like from a researcher standpoint, like how does a research sort of think about that or account for that or consider?
Wow, it's very difficult to build a good study with good methodology in relation to probiotics or microbiota, sorry. In that sense, also the background is very important. I was remember one classic study in microbiota. It was about the children from Burkina Faso and the children from Italy. They were in the same age range. They have maybe physical conditions difference, yes, but the diet was the break of the study. It was like you if you born and you eat from the food from Burkina Faso, you will have another microbiota profile, very different from Italy. They have another type of food, type of maybe physical activity, but in the case of these children, we have different backgrounds, very different backgrounds. For example, here in Latin America could be very different for Europe. Yes, so we have
Yeah.
different food, nutritional profile of food. We have different customs or maybe kind of life or quality of life, and it could change in a huge way, the microbiota profile. So I just was remember this study, and it has a lot of limitations also because it's very difficult to have the specific recorder of food, for example, of
Yeah.
intake food. Um, we have different ways of burn, for example, of children. We have difference in antibiotic intake the first 6 months of life. It could change a lot the microbiota of the adult. Maybe all these reasons, and maybe the localization of the countries, it could change the conditions of microbiota. Also here in Colombia, just to give an example, we did research. The research was from Viviana Aya. She studied the microbiota in athletes, not athletes, but the athletes. She took two groups, cyclists and powerlifters. And they were from two different sports, kind of sports. And the cyclists were from Boyacá. This is a specific region of Colombia that it's known for being one of the most important places of agriculture and maybe traditional food of Colombia. And we have, just for this reason, we have a different profile just for the localization, for geographical localization. We have a huge difference in this profile of microbiota in relation to the sedentary people that they were from Bogota, that is a big city, the capital city of Colombia, and the powerlifters, they were from Cali. We have three different localizations with different ways of life and also different ways of feeding, of food intake. It changed everything. We have maybe some issues related to the I don't know how to say it in English, maybe the agriculture ways to get the food. We have different minerals and bacteria and microorganisms from the sites, different in different ways. For example, here in Bogota, we have another food, maybe this another way of feeding. For example, based on ultra processed foods, maybe it's less artisanal, maybe less natural dishes or foods. It could change everything in the microbiota. We have different interesting results related to these places, different places in just one country. In
Right,
different
right.
states of the country, we can have a lot of changes in the microbiota.
And as a researcher and people doing research, do
Oh,
you try to control for those types of things?
yes, yes. It's to control maybe the age that the subjects could participate in the study. This is one thing because the microbiota could change in diversity and richness across the lifespan. It could be a good way. We must to make a difference between men and women because we have difference also in hormonal physiology, and maybe it could have a different way to analyze the microbiota. Also, the diet is very important to assess the diet, to assess the diet intake in a specific way. For example, the 24-hour recorder. It's a good way to do it, or the daily of foods, the diary of food, sorry, of the day, or 1 or 2 days. We can have this photo of the diet. Maybe the body composition. It's very important to assess the body composition of the subjects. The weight, the height, maybe the circumferences. This body composition can be affect, or the microbiota can affect the body composition, and the body composition can affect the profile of microbiota. Also, maybe to modulate this use of medicines. It's very important to ask to this. And also the localization, the background. It's very important to know the background, maybe the race or the background of the subject could be very important to know, maybe how the microbiota could be modulated from the childhood.
Right, right, right. Got one question as you were speaking. Does pregnancy affect the microbiome?
The pregnancy.
Yeah.
Yes, of course, but it's an unknown. Maybe, for example, the placenta could be I don't know, there is a microbiome from placenta, is unknown yet, but the way of birth and the feeding of the baby could be affect the microbiota.
Yeah.
But we don't know yet if, for example, in placenta, there is a specific profile of microbiota. We don't know. And we don't know if the maternal intake of food could affect directly the microbiota of the baby. We don't know yet. It's very difficult because we have a lot of limitations to build our research with pregnancy, with pregnant women. Yes, we have
Yeah.
these limitations, so it's very difficult to know.
Is this known if, say, for example, if a woman was having a cesarean rather than a vaginal birth, and or not doing breastfeeding, which, as you had mentioned, those things are going to affect the microbiome of the baby, right? Including like lasting, right? Like lifelong sort of impacts. If a woman does not have a vaginal birth and or does not breastfeed, is there enough information or data to suggest that the baby should get some sort of additional probiotic, intake if they're not having the vaginal birth or breastfeeding? Is there enough known about that?
There is no data specific in that way to the probiotic supplementation in children, in toddlers or children. there is not a lot of data related to it, but we have enough data in terms of the changes in birth, in vaginal or cesarean birth, and also the breastfeeding or not the breastfeeding. Yes, we have a lot of changes. For example, in cesarean birth, we have the microbiota, the gut microbiota. It's similar to the skin microbiota. That is very different profile. There is a different profile from gut microbiota. And also in vaginal birth, we have a lot of lactobacilli contact with the baby from vagina's microbiota. And in the case of vaginal birth, we have this good population of lactobacilli in the skin of the baby. And also we have more population of bifidobacteria in these maybe 2 first years of life. In the case of the babies with this cesarean burn, we have a diverse microbiota, and it's not good in profile because the first 2 years we must to have the majority of bifidobacteria in the gut. There is a lot of, no, sorry, there is a richness of bifidobacteria, but it's the only one type of bacteria is in the babies. So in that case, if we have this cesarean burn, we have another profile of microbiota. It happens with the breastfeeding. In this case, the breastfeeding can contribute to the bifidobacteria, maybe to the growth of bifidobacteria in the gut, in the baby's gut. And the breastfeeding can have the oligosaccharides, prebiotics, that could be very beneficial for the children, for the baby. See? And so in that sense, it could change everything in the rest of the life in this microbiota profile. So it could be a benefit to the supplementation of probiotics, but maybe, yes, to do research in children, it could have another ethical dilemmas also. So it's very difficult to have these studies in children or in babies.
Okay, cool. All right. Let's talk a little bit about exercise.
Okay.
Does exercise affect the microbiome?
Yes. It's a great modulator of microbiota. It's very important to talk about exercise, because the exercise could also change the profile of bacteria related to a butyrate production. Is the main effect of exercise in microbiota. This production of butyrate can have anti-inflammatory properties, and also could confer less oxidative stress, could confer more energy, more gluconeogenesis, and this kind of maybe efficient of energy to the athlete. So the exercise maybe in high intensity, or maybe moderate intensity to high intensity, and also continue exercise can benefit to improving the bacteria that can produce butyrate, for example. And this butyrate, this short chain fatty acid, has a very comproved anti-inflammatory properties. So in that sense, it could be very good to exercise as a medicine. The exercise is our medicine, and also to the microbiota, the exercise is the medicine that could have another profile in that way.
And so the microbiome, well, exercise, as we know, is hugely important for for health, right, and the prevention of disease. And especially now we're learning a lot more about the really really fine, small scale molecular cellular physiology of what are the actual mechanisms, right, that lead to improved health and improved outcomes from exercise. And it seems like the microbiome is just another piece to that, right? Another mechanism that leads to positive health outcomes, correct?
Yeah, it's correct. In terms of performance, we have also the reduce, for example, of fatigue parameters, for example, the reduce of ammonia production. We have the improvement of aerobic exercise performance, anaerobic performance. The athletes maybe have with a different profile of bacteria producing butyrate could be less fatigued. I don't know how to say it. Less
Fatigue, yeah.
damage. Yes, fatigued. Less muscle damage, for example. Have an efficient recovery in that cases with just to have the exercise as the medicine for the microbiota. It's very good results for exercise. There are very good results for exercise.
And are there big differences in terms of the effects of different types of exercise on the microbiome, say strength or strength and resistance type exercise versus aerobic type exercise? Is there a large difference depending on the type?
Yes, depending on the type of exercise, we have different bacteria. For example, in resistance exercise, we could have more bacteria that can ferment proteins, for example, as the final result of their fermentation. It could be more beneficial to have these bacteria that use the proteins from diet and can grow and fermentate these proteins with good outcomes, for example, in physiological parameters. Yeah. In the other way, we have in the aerobic exercise, we have another type of bacteria that can fermentate carbohydrates, for example, from diet of these athletes, maybe marathoners, runners, triathletes, etc. We can have a different diet and different fermentation of these bacteria from carbohydrates. And then we can have this maybe the production of butyrate from this kind of sports. And in the resistance training or exercise, we have maybe these bacteria that can fermentate proteins, giving another results good in good ways and in other not good to good ways. For example, to produce in Spanish is sulfato, the azufre, sulfur. Yes, exactly.
Sulfur. Okay.
Sulfur. Yes, but at the same time, it could be beneficial for muscle. This profile of bacteria that come from the resistant exercise. So yeah, we have the kind of bacteria of resistant exercise, and we have the different bacteria from aerobic exercise because we use different substrates for each type of exercise. So we can have different final products in different ways, and we can have different bacteria that ferment proteins and carbohydrates in different ways. So it could change depending on the type of exports.
And so with that, it's exercise, like you said, is good, and exercise is medicine. And also with that, we always recommend doing both, right? Aerobic and strength based type of training. And as you're mentioning, or like you're mentioning, that each of the specific types of training have different effects. It's probably the case that doing both is probably the best thing to do, right? Just like
Yes.
with like health and improved outcomes in general, doing a mix of aerobic and strength exercise, right?
Yes, both are recommended because you can improve also the diversity and the richness of your microbiota. So if you affect both diversity and richness, you could have a healthier microbiota that it doesn't exist yet, but your microbiota could be more efficient in their action, in his action. So
Correlated with better outcomes.
yes, in
Yeah.
that in all ways. For example, to modulate inflammation, to improve the oxidative stress, maybe to have more the decrease of cortisol, for example, that it's also a modulator of microbiota, to increase the neurotransmitters. I don't know how to say it in English.
Neurotransmitters.
In the brain, for example. And so we have maybe the double of benefits to combine both resistance and aerobic exercise.
Okay, I want to ask two questions. One is specific to, say, endurance exercise, and then one is specific to more specific to strength. So, like with endurance exercise, I've read that probiotics are good at reducing gut permeability, right? Which can be an issue, especially with longer duration aerobic activity, especially in the heat, right? So what is the relationship with the microbiome and say probiotics with improving the gut intestinal barrier and reducing gastrointestinal stress during, say, like an endurance performance?
Wow, it's a important question. So, for example, in conditions of heat, for example, long exercise, we have these changes of this barrier. In the gut, we have these barrier cells, and we have as an important maybe signal of inflammation in the gut, we have the permeability of these bacteria, these back bacteria, and also inflammatory systems. If we don't have this barrier strong, it could pass these kind of things, these systems, and also these microorganisms inside the lumen, and it could maybe develop these inflammatory changes and also these symptoms, for example, these GA symptoms in the athletes. So in that sense, probiotics and also the diet and these factors that we talk about earlier could modulate this barrier. So in that sense, for example, probiotics could maybe to improve the tight junctions, and the integrity of this barrier, intestinal barrier. So in that sense, for example, in stress conditions, as heat training or competition, or for example, long training in aerobic conditions in high intensity, can change can affect, this barrier integrity, and can permeate or pass or change the permeability of this barrier, maybe to the increase of LPS, lipopolysaccharides, inflammatory markers that could enter to the lumen and can develop this inflammatory response in the athlete. So yes, maybe we talk the streams. Maybe it's not for low intensity of exercise and not too much. Yeah, not too much in stress conditions, because it could affect the integrity of this barrier and also could develop this inflammatory response.
And also, great. That was perfect. That's what I was interested in. But also, in my reading, one of the things that is proposed to be one of the most beneficial things from, especially like from an athlete standpoint, is the reduction in upper respiratory tract infections, which allows them to, continue to train, right? Not have to take time off from being sick and having to recover and things like that, but being able to keep their training volume, training schedule up, so they're not busy being sick. So can you speak a little bit to the effect on upper respiratory tract infections?
Yeah, as we know, in the gut, we have a good amount of immune cells, and we have one of the biggest immune responses in the body, in our gut. So for this reason, if we have the changes in the gut barrier and the profile of microbiota, we could affect the immune system, because the immune system is working inside the lumen to fight against this inflammation or these bad bacteria. So for that reason, we have this maybe this strong relation between the immune system and the microbiota. In that sense, for example, if we have the less diversity, less richness, and we have the inflammatory cytokines or markers inside the gut, we will have these GI symptoms or the upper tract respiratory symptoms. So it's related more that the immune response of the microbiota and the integrity of this barrier, because the gut barrier, it's one of the immune response, our innate immune response. So in that sense, we affect both responses or both mechanisms. Maybe the innate response and the adaptive response of the immune system. Both are in the gut. So for that reason, we can, if we have this dysbiosis, this unbalance or different microbiota profile, we can affect their immune system response. It's, for example, the GI symptoms in the athletes and the upper tract, respiratory tract symptoms. That is the physical way to see this dysbiosis in the microbiota.
Perfecto, perfecto. With the strength training, you mentioned it, and then also I'd read that the microbiome and probiotic. I think it was, from the specifics that I read, was supplementation, but I'm sure diet also affects this as well. But it can reduce muscle damage, and so my question is the probiotic effect on muscle damage, is that local at the muscle, or is that more related to the secondary inflammatory response, if that is known?
It's more related to the second part, because as we talk about, the microbiota can modulate the pro-inflammatory cytokines in relation to the high intensive exercise that can produce muscle damage. So in that way, it's like a change, a chain, like something like that. Because if you have this muscle damage, it's possible that you have an increase of pro-inflammatory cytokines, and these pro-inflammatory cytokines change the immune response of the microbiota. So in that sense, this action in the immune response can affect the recovery of this muscle damage, for example. So we have this, I don't know, like a cycle relationship. it's like this: you have the muscle damage, how your microbiome responds to these inflammatory cytokines, and then the immune response of this gut microbiota, how can affect and to leave this substance, anti-inflammatory substance, to the muscle. So maybe it's not a linear relationship. It's like a cycle relationship in that way.
I guess in kind of to close, I had asked and we had talked about, whether or not there is, quote unquote, a good microbiome profile or sort of like a diagnostic, like a test that tells you, oh, you have a good profile or you don't have a good profile and things like that. But there are data showing, right, certain foods, certain supplements, right? Although generally we want to go food first, like you were alluding to, but there are supplementation that has been shown to be lead to positive outcomes, right? Which that's something that I always focus and mention, and I think, yeah, I mentioned this, or this was one of the points in my talks with ISSN Colombia and Motion Sports, right, where I met you and Catalina and Johana. But from a practical standpoint, you want to focus on outcomes, right, rather than the specific mechanisms, because always, and you alluded to this, right? Sometimes the specific mechanisms don't always lead to like a linear relationship to an outcome. That doesn't mean the mechanisms aren't important. But, from a practical standpoint, like for people to use and employ, you want to focus on the outcomes. In my talk, I mentioned that with autophagy, right? People want to focus on autophagy and turn on autophagy, but similar to the microbiome, like you were mentioning here, there's a lot of data that needs to be sort of discovered, first. And you want to focus on, instead of trying to target autophagy, you want to try to target things that are going to improve your health or help you reach your fitness goals or things like that. And so like in our discussion, I kind of had the same thought of, and I think some people might see the supplements or see the podcasts and see the social media and say like, oh, I need to improve my microbiome. I need to treat my microbiome. I need to, target my microbiome. But the current data, like you mentioned, we don't have a test to tell you, right?
No.
But the main thing, and you were mentioning, is sort of eating like a balanced, more or less a balanced diet, but with fruits and vegetables and with fiber and with fermented foods like the yogurt or the kefir. Like these are things that from an outcome standpoint, they're going to lead to positive impacts, right? And that would be the thing that you would want to focus on rather than like, I need to improve my microbiome, because you can't measure that. But in doing these things, more likely than not, the positive outcomes are going to be related to the positive impacts on the microbiome.
Exactly. Yes. Yes, and it's a new field of research yet. We have just still maybe 10 or 11 years of research development. It's now a research new field also. So we don't have these clear studies or these conclusions of to have these outcomes from this strain or this type of microbiota has these benefits greater than another type of microbiota. We don't have this research in a good development. So for saying like that. In that way, we can maybe to add in the way to modulate these factors that can affect our microbiota. We know that there are some factors that can affect our microbiota. So in that way, we can maybe to work with that factors, maybe to improve the
Yeah.
exercise, to change the quality of the diet, maybe to control the environment context of everyone, maybe to work in a good way with our background, for example, maybe to extract the best of our food culture. For in your case, for example, your background's from Latin America, so maybe in your genes, you have something from our genes in common in Colombia, just to give an example. And we maybe we can play with that factors in a good way. It's difficult to say, I want to improve my microbiota, because we don't know what's the best microbiota, what's the healthy microbiota. We don't know, it's unknown. Everyone could be, or everyone can have, a different microbiota profile, and it could be good for me, but in your case, it could be worse for you. We don't know. So in that sense, maybe my advice is to work more with the factors that can modulate the microbiota more than the specific profile of microbiota,
Yeah.
because we know the mechanism, the physiological mechanism of microbiota, what can change or in that way, but we don't know exactly in the amounts, the strains, and the specific profile. We don't know. For everyone could be very different. It's like a individual is an individual variable.
Yeah.
So in that case, I prefer to modulate the diet, the exercise, the use of antibiotics, for example, the other external factors, and also to know my internal factor, my background, my geographical background, my family, the food of my country. It's more important to work with it than to maybe to emphasize just in the tests of microbiota, or maybe to have this specific profile that we found in the research, because it's different contexts in every study. It's a different aim, objectives in every study, and we can be maybe to falling in a mistake to think that it could be the same outcome to me in, for example, one Mies model. It's very different. So we must be careful in reading this. This is microbiota studies.
Yeah. Yeah. Por supuesto, por supuesto. Que perfecto. Last question. Do we know the effect of Club Colombia on microbiome?
What?
La cerveza. Club. Me encanta esa cerveza. Oh my gosh, that is so good.
Yes, we know. Maybe the beer is a fermented drink. It's maybe it's different to another alcohol drinks. As a fermented drink, it could have microorganisms as fungi, for example, and the beer can have carbohydrates and other nutritional components. So in that sense, it could be good because it could bring to the microbiota different microorganisms, like gels, for example, the fungi microorganisms, and also can give carbohydrates. But at the same time, a great amount of beer drinking could contribute to the increase of pro-inflammatory cytokines. So Maybe it's depends of the amount of drinking, and
Yeah,
maybe the
puro
content that
crudo is too
you,
much.
yeah, the way that you drink your beer also it could
Yeah.
affect, because if you eat this beer with fast food, it change everything, because you are giving to your body the saturated fats, maybe sugars and other substrates that the microbiota don't give any benefits to microbiota. On the contrary, it could be bad for microbiota. It could increase these pro-inflammatory cytokines. So in one way, beer could be good in the sense that you give microorganisms and also substrates. But if you increase your beer intake, it could be worse for your microbiota in the sense of the pro-inflammatory response.
Okay. That is important information, useful information. But that beer, oh man, that was so good. I missed that beer.
Okay, okay. It's very good. It's very good. I know.
Yes. Okay, well, Katherin, thank you very much for your time. This was great. This was a topic that I didn't really know too much about, but always been interested and always a little skeptical because, again, a lot of people might overhype things. So to have you come in and talk about the actual science and the data and the physiology is really, really useful to try to make sense of things. So hopefully people come away with some good information, right? So
Okay, yes.
thank you very much. Thank you very much. It's great to see you again. And yeah, gracias por su tiempo.
Thank you very much for your invitation, and thank you for all of you. Sorry for my English. I'm trying to improve my English as you improve your Spanish speaking. So thank you very much for your patience. And also, yeah, sorry for every or any mistake of my speaking. Thank you very much.
No, it was good. Es mejor de mi español. And like I told Catalina, mi deseo es para hacer este podcast en español. Un día. Ahora
Lo
no,
vas a hacer. Seguro que
pero un
sí.
día oramos por eso. Y cuando puede ser, hablamos otra vez en español.
Claro que sí. Claro que sí.
Yeah.
Un gran saludo.
Okay, all right.
Muchas gracias.